I was lacing up my shoes to bring a pie to my son's house when my lawyer sent me a message that froze my blood. Call me immediately. Minutes later, he told me the truth that shattered me. My own son was secretly trying to steal my home and declare me insane. Tell me, if you got a message like that right before heading to dinner with your family, would you still go? Or would you crumble under the weight of betrayal? But before I begin, I want to mention that this channel is having a $200 giveaway to celebrate our subscribers. I can hardly believe people are interested in this old lady's stories. To participate, it's simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, a little about yourself, or share a beautiful story. I'd love to know who you are. That Thursday had started like any other. The Cleveland air was cool, the leaves painted gold and red. I'd slipped into my lavender sweater, brushed out my silver hair, and set an apple pie on the counter to cool. Grace, my sweet granddaughter, loved my pies. I thought tonight would be about family. About love. But when I saw Richard Grant's text, 4 words that carried the weight of a storm, my chest tightened. Richard wasn't just any lawyer. He'd handled my affairs for more than 20 years. Calm, steady, trustworthy. He was not the kind of man to send frantic messages without reason. I dialed his number with trembling hands. The room felt colder than a graveyard. Richard? My voice cracked as soon as he answered. His tone was firm but uneasy. Eleanor, listen to me. We need to talk about David. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone until my fingers ached. What about my son? I asked, even though my gut already twisted in dread. He sighed, long and heavy, the kind of sigh that tells you your world is about to break. Eleanor, David has been forging your signature. He's transferring your house into his name. And worse, he's filed paperwork claiming you're mentally incompetent. My breath caught in my throat. My David. The boy I raised alone after his father died. The child I worked double shifts for, just so he could finish college. The same son I trusted with every secret of my heart. And yet, here I was, being told he wanted to erase me. I whispered, no. Not David. He wouldn't. But as the words left my lips, I thought of Linda, his wife. The way she'd once looked at me with disdain. The quiet conversations I'd overheard about money. And deep down, I knew Richard wasn't lying. I glanced at the pie cooling on the counter. A pie baked with love. A pie meant for family. Suddenly, it felt like a cruel joke, mocking me from across the kitchen. That night, my world cracked open. So let me ask you, what would you do if your own child betrayed you this way? Would you forgive them, or would you make them face the consequences? After Richard's call, I sat frozen on my bed for nearly an hour. My son, the child I once cradled against my chest, was plotting to steal my home and lock me away like a useless old woman. My heart begged me not to believe it. My mind told me Richard would never lie to me. But even with the truth pounding in my ears, I still went to dinner that night. Maybe I wanted to see it for myself. Maybe I wanted one last chance to believe my son was innocent. The drive to Shaker Heights felt longer than ever. Streetlights blurred through my tears as I clutched the pie on the passenger seat like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. When I pulled into David's driveway, the house looked warm and inviting. Lights glowing in every window. A home I had once helped him buy, proud that my sacrifice had given him such stability. The front door opened before I could knock. David stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the same charming smile he had since boyhood. "Mom. You made it," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His voice was warm, familiar, safe. For a moment, I almost believed Richard had been wrong. But then Linda appeared. She floated in beside David like a queen surveying her kingdom. Her black dress hugged her figure, her gold earrings caught the light. And her eyes, sharp, cold, unblinking, landed on me with the same look I imagine a vulture gives to the dying. "Eleanor," she said smoothly. "We're so glad you came." "Glad I came?" The words dripped with something I couldn't place, mockery, maybe, or anticipation. Grace came bounding down the stairs then, her smile brighter than both her parents combined. "Grandma. You brought pie." She wrapped her arms around me, her warmth pressing against my brittle bones, and for that single moment I felt safe. We sat down to dinner. The table was perfect: roasted chicken, potatoes, salad tossed in Linda's signature vinaigrette. I sat across from David, watching every flicker of his face, every movement of his hands. At first, it felt almost normal. We talked about Grace's school play. About the weather. About how the Cavaliers might do this season. But underneath the small talk was a current, a silent river dragging us somewhere darker. Halfway through the meal, I saw it. The way David leaned closer to Linda, his hand brushing hers. The small, secret smile she gave him. And then, in a voice so low she must have thought I couldn't hear, Linda whispered one word. "Soon." I froze. My fork clattered against my plate. My chest burned as Richard's warning came roaring back. David cleared his throat, covering the sound, and launched into a story about work. But I didn't hear a single word. All I could think was, soon what? Soon I'll be declared insane? Soon my home will no longer be mine? Soon I'll be forgotten in some nursing home while they spend my money? After dinner, I helped Grace carry plates to the kitchen. Her sweet face was full of innocence, her chatter light and happy. She had no idea the ground beneath her family was crumbling. When I returned to the dining room, Linda was pouring David another glass of wine. Their laughter floated through the air, sharp as broken glass. I smiled weakly, excused myself, and stepped into the night. The drive home felt different. My heart didn't beg anymore. My heart knew. The betrayal wasn't some distant storm on the horizon. It was here, in my son's laughter, in Linda's whisper, in the way their hands found each other across the table. By the time I set the empty pie plate on my counter, my body was shaking. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the lavender sweater I had chosen so carefully that morning. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Every tick was a reminder that time was running out. The next morning, Richard called again. His voice was firm. "Eleanor, you need to act now. If David's paperwork goes through, you could lose everything. Your house. Your savings. Even control over your own life." I closed my eyes. And for the first time I admitted it out loud. My son is trying to erase me. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay silent for love's sake, or would you fight to protect the life you built? The morning after that dinner, I drove to Richard Grant's law office downtown. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the whole way. I'd hardly slept. How could I, after hearing Linda whisper soon and seeing the smug look in her eyes. Richard's office was in a tall brick building with polished marble floors and a front desk clerk who greeted me warmly. But even the friendly smile of the young receptionist couldn't ease the knot in my stomach. When I stepped into Richard's office, he didn't waste time with small talk. His desk was covered in files, neatly stacked, but one folder lay open in the center like a wound waiting to bleed. "Sit down, Eleanor," he said gently. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of something he wished he didn't have to show me. I lowered myself into the chair, clutching my purse as though it might anchor me in place. Richard slid the folder toward me. "This is what I tried to warn you about." I leaned forward and froze. My name was scrawled across the top of the papers, my name, my signature. But I hadn't signed a single one. This isn't me," I whispered, my hand trembling as I touched the ink. Richard nodded. "I know. These signatures are forged. David has been using them to claim ownership of your property." Page after page told the same story: my rental house, my savings account, even the deed to my own home. Each one bore my name, twisted into a lie. And then Richard pulled out another document. His jaw tightened as he handed it to me. "This," he said, "is the affidavit." I scanned the words. My vision blurred with tears. It declared that I was mentally incompetent, incapable of managing my own affairs. It claimed neighbors had witnessed me wandering the street confused, that I had forgotten names, that I couldn't keep track of daily tasks. Every word was a lie. Who would write this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Your son," Richard answered quietly. "And Linda. They've gathered fake statements, even paid people to support their case. They want you declared unfit so they can take control of everything." I covered my mouth, my body shaking. My son, the boy I had raised after his father's death, the boy who once cried when I left him at kindergarten, was trying to erase me from my own life. Richard leaned forward. "Eleanor, you need to fight this. If these documents go through, you won't just lose your house. You'll lose your freedom. They could put you in a nursing home against your will." The word nursing home cut into me like a knife. I had walked the halls of those places, visiting friends. Some were cared for well. Others were forgotten. Was that what David wanted for me? To be forgotten, locked away while he and Linda enjoyed the fruits of my labor? Tears blurred my vision. Richard, why would he do this? Why would my own child turn against me like this? Richard sighed. Greed. Manipulation. Maybe pressure from Linda. I don't know all of it yet. But Eleanor, one thing is clear, they don't see you as a mother anymore. They see you as an obstacle. The word lodged in my chest. Obstacle. That's all I was to them now. Not the woman who had scraped and saved to send David to college. Not the mother who worked 2 shifts to keep the lights on. Just an obstacle standing in the way of their greed. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the documents that bore my name but not my hand. And then something shifted inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in years. They think I'm weak, I whispered. They think I'm too old to fight. But they've forgotten who raised David. They've forgotten what I've survived. Richard gave me a firm nod. Then we'll fight this. Together. I stood slowly, sliding the folder back across the desk. My hands had stopped trembling. My heart was still broken, but in that moment, it also hardened. As I walked out of Richard's office, I thought of Linda's whisper at the dinner table. Soon. Well, she was right. Something was coming soon. But not what she expected. Tell me, if you discovered your own child forged your signature and called you incompetent, would you stay silent, or would you rise up and fight back? The following Sunday, David invited me back for dinner. Under normal circumstances, I might have refused. But now I knew better, this was no ordinary meal. It was a stage, and I was the silent audience to their secret performance. I slipped on a navy shawl, steadied my breath, and carried a basket of rolls I had baked fresh that morning. My hands looked calm, but inside, my heart pounded. Richard's words echoed in my mind, they don't see you as a mother anymore. They see you as an obstacle. When David opened the door, he was all smiles again. His arms wrapped around me with the warmth of a loving son. But I felt it, the distance in his touch, the hollowness in his eyes. Mom, you didn't have to bring anything, he said cheerfully, ushering me in. Linda was already in the kitchen, wearing a cream blouse and gold bracelet that caught the light. She turned, her smile polite but stiff. Eleanor, those rolls smell delicious. You always spoil us. Spoil them? No, I thought bitterly. I had raised a son and given him everything, and now I was watching him prepare to rob me of it all. Grace ran down the hall, her laughter like sunlight breaking through a storm. She hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. Grandma. You're here. For her sake, I smiled. For her sake, I pretended. Dinner was set beautifully, roasted salmon, green beans, potatoes. We bowed our heads as David said grace. His voice trembled only once, and I wondered if guilt was clawing at him or if it was just the wine on his breath. As we ate, I let them talk. Linda asked about Grace's grades, about David's upcoming work trip, about things that sounded so ordinary it almost made me dizzy. But beneath the chatter, I studied them. The way David's hand brushed Linda's under the table. The way she leaned into him, whispering now and then. I couldn't hear the words this time, but I didn't need to. I already knew. At one point, Linda raised her glass and said lightly, "We should cherish these dinners, Eleanor. Things may change sooner than we think." I almost dropped my fork. Did she really just say that out loud? Or was it my mind twisting her words into knives? I forced a smile and replied, yes. Change does come sooner than expected. She tilted her head, as if testing me, and then sipped her wine. Grace excused herself to finish homework upstairs. The air grew heavier without her laughter to fill it. That's when David leaned forward, lowering his voice. Mom, you know we're always looking out for you, right? The words tasted like poison in my ears. Looking out for me? Was that what they called forging my name and plotting to strip me of everything I owned? I smiled again, calm and collected. Of course, David. I know you always have my best interests at heart. Inside, I burned. But outwardly, I played the part of the trusting mother. Because sometimes survival means pretending you don't see the knife being sharpened behind your back. When I finally left, Linda kissed my cheek. Her perfume clung to my sweater long after I'd driven away, sickly sweet, a reminder of the war I was now fighting in silence. That night, alone in my house, I whispered to myself. They think they're winning. Let them think that. Soon, they'll see who I really am. Tell me, if you knew your own family was plotting behind your back, would you confront them immediately, or would you wait for the perfect moment to strike? It was 2 nights after that dinner when I heard the knock at my front door. Soft, hesitant, almost like the sound of a bird tapping against glass. When I opened it, there she was, Grace. My sweet granddaughter, her face pale, her school backpack hanging loose on one shoulder. "Grandma," she whispered, stepping inside quickly. "I needed to see you." The sight of her so tense made my chest ache. I took her hand, led her to the kitchen, and poured her a glass of water. She sat at the table, eyes darting toward the window as though afraid someone had followed her. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I heard Mom and Dad talking last night." My heart clenched. I squeezed her hand. "What did you hear?" She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing circles on the wood. They said once they got everything, they were going to put you in a home." The words dropped between us like stones in a well. I closed my eyes. Even though Richard had warned me, even though I'd seen the forged documents, hearing it from Grace's lips made it real in a way that broke me all over again. I forced my voice to stay calm for her sake. "What exactly did they say?" She swallowed hard. "Dad said, as soon as Mom signs over, we'll have her placed. Linda, you'll finally get the house you always wanted." And Mom laughed. She laughed, Grandma. Tears pricked at my eyes. I had imagined betrayal before, but never laughter. Never the sound of joy at the thought of erasing me. Grace reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found mine. "Grandma, I don't want you to go away. I don't want them to do this to you." I gathered her into my arms, holding her close. "Sweetheart, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. They may think they can get rid of me, but your grandma is stronger than they know." She pressed her face into my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt the fierce protectiveness of motherhood all over again. Not for David anymore, he had chosen his path. But for Grace. For the child who still had goodness in her heart. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet. "Why would Dad do this? Doesn't he love you?" The question pierced me deeper than any knife. I didn't know how to answer her without breaking completely. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "people let greed blind them. Sometimes they forget where they came from. But love, real love, doesn't disappear, Grace. It's still here. Between you and me." She nodded, but the pain in her eyes told me she understood more than a child should ever have to. That night, after she left, I sat in my quiet kitchen long after midnight. The pie plate from Sunday still rested on the counter, empty. I stared at it until my vision blurred. My son wanted to sell my home. My daughter-in-law wanted me declared incompetent. And now my granddaughter had to carry the weight of overhearing her parents' plan to discard me like a worn-out coat. But instead of crushing me, something new rose inside, rage, sharpened into resolve. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would beg. But they had forgotten, I raised David alone after his father died. I had survived poverty, exhaustion, heartbreak. And I would survive this, too. As I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, I whispered into the darkness. "They want a fight? They'll get one. So let me ask you, if your own grandchild came to you with a secret like this, would you stay quiet to protect them, or would you rise up and show them that no one buries a grandmother without a war?" The morning after Grace's confession, I called Richard. My voice shook, but not from fear, this time it was from anger. She heard them, Richard. My own granddaughter heard them planning to put me in a home. They weren't even careful about hiding it. There was a pause on the other end. Then his steady voice replied, Eleanor, I've been digging deeper. I was hoping I'd be wrong, but you need to come into the office. I've found something else. By noon, I was seated in his office again. The folder in front of him was thicker now, stuffed with papers and highlighted notes. He pushed a page toward me. Do you remember the rental house you owned on the east side? Of course, I said quickly. I lived off the rent from that place for years. He nodded grimly. It's gone, Eleanor. Sold 3 months ago. The deed transfer is right here. I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. Sold? But I never. You never signed a thing, Richard interrupted firmly. David and Linda did. Using your name. And the money? He pulled out another sheet. Deposited into an account under Linda's maiden name. Hidden away, likely so it wouldn't trace back to David. I pressed a hand to my forehead. How much? Almost $200,000, Richard said quietly. My hand shook against my temple. 200,000. Money I had saved, earned, fought for. Gone, like dust blown into the wind. And that's not all, Richard added. I believe they're preparing to sell another property. They're moving fast, Eleanor. If we don't act, you could lose everything within weeks. I stared at the papers, my chest tight. I thought of all the nights I had worked double shifts as a nurse, missing birthdays and holidays just to make ends meet. I thought of standing in grocery store aisles with coupons, counting out change to buy cereal. And now, my son and his wife were selling my life out from under me as if it were nothing. Richard leaned forward. We can fight this. But you have to be ready for a battle, Eleanor. Once this goes to court, David won't hold back. I shook my head slowly. He already hasn't. There was silence between us for a long moment. Then I looked him in the eye and said words I never thought I'd speak. I want to stop them, Richard. Not just stop them, I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to know what it means to be betrayed. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then we'll gather everything. We'll build the case piece by piece. As I left his office that day, the city felt different. The streets were the same, the cars honking, people rushing. But inside me, something had shifted. I wasn't just a grandmother baking pies and wearing lavender sweaters anymore. I was a woman with nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me where my husband once sat. Henry, I whispered into the silence, our boy is gone. He's not the man we raised. But I promise you, I'll protect Grace. I'll protect what's ours. For the first time in weeks, my tears weren't just of sadness. They were of fire. Because now I had proof. Now I had fuel. And soon, I would have my revenge. But let me ask you, if you found out your own child had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from you, would you still call it love, or would you call it war? A week later, I found myself back in Richard's office. The fall air outside had turned sharp, biting at my cheeks as I walked in. I thought I was prepared for anything by now. But nothing could have prepared me for what Richard uncovered next. He handed me another folder, heavier than the last. Eleanor, this isn't just David's doing. Linda has been pulling the strings for years. I opened the folder, my hands trembling. Inside were records, credit card debts, failed business ventures, court notices I had never known existed. Linda's name appeared again and again, drowning in red ink. She was nearly bankrupt before she met David, Richard explained, his voice low and steady. He bailed her out when they married, but her resentment grew. Living in your home for those first few years, she hated it. She felt controlled. Trapped. I remembered it vividly. When David first married Linda, they had moved into the upstairs apartment in my house. I thought I was doing them a kindness, helping them save money. But Linda had always looked uncomfortable there, her chin tilted high, as if the walls themselves insulted her. Richard flipped another page. Eleanor, I also found emails. Some to creditors, some to old friends. She wrote that she would never be free until Eleanor was out of the picture. The words blurred before my eyes. Out of the picture. That was how she saw me, not as a mother-in-law, not as a grandmother, not as a human being. Just an obstacle standing between her and the life she thought she deserved. I gripped the edge of Richard's desk, my nails digging into the wood. So it was her. She poisoned David against me. Richard nodded slowly. I believe so. David may have signed the papers, but Linda, she lit the fire. She convinced him that your money should be theirs. My chest ached, but not from weakness. From fury. From the realization that the daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my family with open arms had been plotting against me all along. I remembered the first time she visited my kitchen, years ago. I had served her tea in my favorite china cups. She smiled politely, but her eyes had wandered, scanning the shelves, the cabinets, the very bones of the house. As if she was already measuring what would one day be hers. Richard, I whispered, my throat tight, how long has this been going on? Years, he said simply. The debts, the resentment, the pressure on David, it's been building for a long time. This didn't happen overnight. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. My heart was heavy with grief, but underneath it pulsed something sharper. All this time, I thought I was fighting to save my home. But now I saw the truth. I was fighting against a woman who wanted to erase me from existence. Richard reached across the desk, his hand firm on mine. You're not alone in this. We'll gather more evidence. But you need to stay strong, Eleanor. Don't let them see you falter. I nodded slowly, my resolve hardening like steel. I won't. Not anymore. That night, at home, I sat by my window, watching the streetlights flicker. My heart replayed every moment with Linda, her polite smiles, her quiet disdain, her whisper of soon at the dinner table. I realized then that I had been too forgiving. Too blind. I had let her into my home, into my family, into my life. And she had repaid me by trying to bury me alive. But she had made one mistake. She underestimated me. I whispered into the night, my voice steady as stone. She thinks she's playing chess. But she doesn't know, I've survived worse than her. And this time, I'll be the one to finish the game. So tell me, if your daughter-in-law plotted to erase you from your own life, would you bow out quietly, or would you rise up and show her that no one buries a grandmother without consequences? I used to believe that motherhood was unshakable. That no matter what happened, no matter the mistakes, a bond between mother and child could bend but never break. But that belief died the night I looked at the forged documents Richard placed in my hands. It died the night Grace whispered through tears that her parents were planning to put me in a home. It died the moment I realized Linda's disdain had turned into a full-scale war. And in its place, something else was born. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. In front of me lay a single sheet of paper, the affidavit claiming I was incompetent. The lies were so thick, so cruel, that I could barely see through my tears. She forgets names. She can't manage her own affairs. She wanders confused in the neighborhood. Lies. All lies. I ran my hand over the words, my fingers trembling. And in that moment, my grief turned into fury. How dare they? How dare my own son reduce me to a shell of myself? How dare Linda write me out of my own life story? I thought of David as a boy, chubby cheeks, wide eyes, clutching my hand as we crossed busy streets. He used to cry when I left for work, begging me to stay home. I used to whisper, "I'm doing this for you, sweetheart. So you'll have a better life." And now, that same boy had become a man willing to steal the very life I built for him. The weight of it all crushed me until I couldn't breathe. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed harder than I had in years. But grief has a way of transforming. At first, it weakens you. Then, if you let it, it hardens you. When I finally lifted my head, the tears on my cheeks had dried into salt. My hands no longer trembled. My breath came steady. "No more," I whispered into the silence. That was the night the mother in me died, and the fighter was born. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My silver hair framed a face lined with age and sorrow, but in my eyes burned something new. Resolve. I called Richard. My voice was calm, measured. "It's time," I told him. "No more waiting. No more pretending. If David and Linda want war, then war is what they'll get." He didn't try to comfort me. He didn't try to tell me otherwise. He only said, "Then we'll prepare." From that day forward, I played my part carefully. When David called, I answered with warmth in my voice. When Linda invited me to dinner, I smiled and agreed. To them, I was still the sweet, aging grandmother who trusted them blindly. But behind the smile, I was watching. Listening. Gathering. Because now I knew the truth, I was no longer their mother, their mother-in-law, their grandmother. To them, I was an obstacle. And to me, they had become the enemy. So let me ask you, if you reached the point where your own family no longer saw you as blood, but as prey, would you surrender quietly, or would you become the hunter they never saw coming? Richard called me 2 days after my breaking point. His voice carried a steadiness that gave me comfort, but this time there was also something else, a spark of momentum.